On the day my dad came home, I decided to carry out the plan I had been thinking about for a while. I put the drug into his tea, making sure to stir it well so it would dissolve completely. After that, I handed him the cup and watched as he drank it all, without any suspicion. We left the house soon after that, knowing it would take about 4 hours for the drug to fully take effect. The drug was supposed to make him unconscious, so we needed to be patient. I had connected the CCTV cameras in my dad's house to my phone, allowing me to watch everything that was happening there even when I wasn't around. It was a smart move, and it gave me peace of mind that I could see what was going on at any time. After 5 hours passed, I checked my phone and started watching the live footage. Just as I expected, my dad was lying on the couch in the living room, completely passed out. He wasn't moving at all. What happened next took me by surprise. My dad's girlfriend, Lauren, walked into the room and saw him lying there. Instead of panicking or calling for help, she walked up to him and slapped him on the face, trying to wake him up. But he didn't respond at all. He just lay there, unconscious. Rather than getting worried or concerned, Lauren did something shocking. She started jumping up and down, clearly excited. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment. After her little celebration, she pulled out her phone and made a video call to someone. The person on the other end of the call was a man. With a big smile on her face, Lauren told him, "The old fool is dead, baby. We're rich." She was convinced that my dad had died and that she was now going to inherit all his money. Lauren had been deceived into believing that my dad had changed his will to leave everything to her. It all started when my dad introduced Lauren to our family, telling us that she was his new girlfriend. At first, we thought he was joking. My name is Scott, and my dad is 75 years old. My siblings and I are all adults now, and most of us are married. My 3 older siblings even have kids of their own, while my wife and I are still planning to start a family. My dad is a wealthy man. He and my late mother built 2 successful beverage companies from the ground up. They worked tirelessly to make their brands well known, and now their products are famous. My mom passed away 12 years ago, and my dad never remarried. So when he suddenly called us all together and introduced us to Lauren, we were completely shocked. That day, we thought my dad had gathered us for one of his usual family meetings where he gives us advice. But when we saw Lauren, we were all stunned. She looked so young, and we couldn't understand how she could be in a relationship with someone as old as my dad. My first thought was that she was just a new housekeeper he had hired. But my dad proudly introduced her, saying, "This is Lauren, my new girlfriend. I'd like you all to treat her with the same respect you give me. Since your mother's death, no one has shown any interest in me, but Lauren did. I'm happy with her." Hearing this, I felt a mix of anger and confusion. How did they meet? When did this relationship start? Were they really in love? I couldn't help but question her intentions. "Does she even love you?" asked my dad. He replied confidently, "She loves me. We've been together for a month, and I can't tell you how happy I've been. She's the best thing that has happened to me since your mother. And she feels the same, right, baby?" Lauren nodded, but I wasn't convinced. She was only 27 years old, and my dad was 75. The age difference was huge, and it was hard to believe that she could truly love him. "How old are you?" I asked Lauren, still trying to make sense of the situation. When she told me she was 27, I was shocked. It confirmed my suspicions. A young woman like her would only be interested in a man as old as my dad for one reason: his money. There was no doubt in my mind that she was after his wealth. "Dad, you need to break up with her," I said, trying to reason with him. "She's too young, and you can't seriously think she's in love with you." But my dad was blinded by his feelings for Lauren, and he refused to listen. He believed that she truly cared for him, but I knew the truth. She was only with him for what she could gain, and now, watching her celebrate on the CCTV footage, I was more convinced than ever. "I'm 52 years old, Dad, and she's young enough to be your granddaughter. This just doesn't feel right at all." I couldn't believe what I was seeing and hearing. My father, a man in his 70s, was seriously dating a woman who was only 27 years old. The age difference was so massive that it was hard to wrap my head around it. I wasn't the only one who felt this way either. My sister quickly jumped in to agree with me, her voice firm and unwavering. "Dad, this is wrong in so many ways. And you, young lady," she turned to Lauren, "there's no way you're actually in love with my father. I just don't believe it. Lauren, however, wasn't fazed by our disbelief. She looked us both in the eye, her expression sincere, and calmly explained, I understand that it's hard for you to believe because of how young I am. But please believe me when I say that I genuinely like your dad, a whole lot. In fact, I've never been in a relationship before because I've never been attracted to younger men. Your dad is the first man I've been with, and I haven't regretted a single day spent with him. I love him. Her words were smooth, convincing even. I had to admit she was good with her words. It wasn't just what she said but how she said it that made it so believable. She didn't need to do much more than talk, and somehow, she managed to lower our defenses. My sister and I exchanged looks, still skeptical but also unsure of how to respond. Could she be telling the truth? Could someone so young really fall for a man so much older? We spent the rest of that day at my dad's house, trying to get to know Lauren better. She was incredibly hospitable, going out of her way to make us feel comfortable. She even prepared a delicious meal for us, and my sister, who rarely complimented anyone, couldn't stop raving about how good the food was. Lauren was so thoughtful that she even packed some extra food for my sister to take home, knowing how much she had enjoyed it. There was something so humble and down-to-earth about Lauren that made it hard to dislike her. She was kind, polite, and seemed genuinely interested in our family. After that day, we met Lauren a couple more times, and with each meeting, our skepticism slowly began to fade. She was consistent in her kindness and care, always making sure my dad was happy and well taken care of. My dad, who had been lonely for so long after my mom passed away, seemed to have found new joy in life with Lauren by his side. He would call me nearly every evening, his voice full of excitement as he recounted the day's events. He talked about how Lauren helped him with everything from cooking to laundry, even washing the dishes after meals. They went out on dates regularly, and he always sounded so happy, almost like he was reliving the days when my mom was still alive. It was strange, but in a way, it felt like my mom had come back into our lives, not in the same form, but through Lauren. As the months passed, my siblings and I found ourselves growing fond of Lauren. We couldn't help it, she was just so lovable. She wasn't just there for my dad. She also took an interest in our lives. I owned a small restaurant at the time, and although it wasn't very big, Lauren would often stop by to help me out with various tasks. She was always willing to lend a hand, whether it was in the kitchen or with organizing things around the place. My older siblings, who had children of their own, also appreciated her help. She would visit them from time to time and offer to babysit or help with whatever they needed. About 6 months into their relationship, my dad dropped another bombshell on us. He and Lauren were getting married. I remember the day he invited us over to share the news. He was practically glowing with excitement, like a young man who had just fallen in love for the first time. But there was something strange about the whole thing. According to my dad, Lauren had proposed to him. She had taken him out on a date at a nice restaurant, and in the middle of their meal, she had pulled out a ring and asked him to marry her. I was stunned. It's not every day you hear about a woman proposing to a man, especially not in a situation like this. It was supposed to be the other way around, wasn't it? Why would she take the initiative to propose after just 8 months of dating? It didn't add up. When we asked my dad why she did it, he said that Lauren was afraid he might not want to marry her because of the age difference. She was worried that he would hesitate, thinking she was too young, so she decided to prove that she was serious about their relationship by proposing herself. My dad thought it was cute and thoughtful, a sign of her commitment and readiness for marriage. I wasn't so sure. The whole situation felt off, but my dad seemed genuinely happy, and Lauren continued to be as sweet and supportive as ever. It was hard to argue against the marriage when both of them seemed so certain about it. I wanted to believe that Lauren's intentions were pure, that she truly loved my dad and wasn't just after his money. But there was always that nagging doubt in the back of my mind, the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The wedding was a small affair, just close family and a few friends. My dad was over the moon, and Lauren looked radiant in her wedding dress. As I watched them exchange vows, I couldn't help but wonder if this was really what was best for him. Could a marriage built on such an unusual foundation really last? Only time would tell. In the weeks following the wedding, things seemed to settle into a routine. Lauren moved in with my dad, and they started their new life together. My siblings and I continued to visit, and each time, Lauren was as warm and welcoming as ever. She made my dad happy, and that was what mattered most. But despite her charm and the way she had won us over, there was still a part of me that remained cautious, always watching for signs that her intentions might not be as genuine as they seemed. Looking back now, I realized that my initial concerns were valid. Lauren had been very strategic in the way she presented herself to us, carefully crafting an image of the perfect partner for my dad. She knew exactly what to say and do to win our trust, and in the end, we were all taken in by her act. But as time went on, the cracks in her facade began to show, revealing a different side of her, one that was more focused on what she could gain than on truly loving and caring for my father. It's hard to admit, but I should have trusted my instincts from the beginning. My dad deserved better, and it pains me to think that we didn't see through Lauren's act until it was too late. Love can be blind, and sometimes, it takes more than just good intentions to protect the people we care about. At first, I thought the same as everyone else. It made sense to me that Lauren might have believed my dad would never marry her because of the significant age gap between them. So, when she proposed to him herself, I saw it as a clear sign that she was genuinely ready for marriage. That's what I convinced myself to believe, so I decided to support her in every way I could. My siblings seemed to share the same reasoning. We all came to an agreement that their marriage was okay, even if deep down, we had our doubts. It wasn't as if our disagreement would have stopped the wedding anyway. Our dad was determined to go through with it. As we began preparing for the wedding, I noticed something that seemed a bit off. Lauren was very insistent on having a court wedding instead of the traditional church ceremony. This struck me as odd, given that our family had always valued religious ceremonies. I voiced my concerns, and my siblings did the same. We felt that a church wedding would be more appropriate and meaningful, especially considering my dad's age and the traditions we were used to. My dad found himself torn between wanting to make Lauren happy and holding on to his own values. He wanted to give her the court wedding she asked for, but the idea didn't sit well with him. It was a tough situation, and we spent a lot of time discussing it. Lauren was clearly disappointed when we pushed back against her wishes, but eventually, we managed to convince her to go with the church wedding instead. Although she reluctantly agreed, it was clear that she wasn't happy about the decision. On the day of the wedding, something felt off again. Lauren didn't seem as excited as we had expected. Her demeanor was subdued, and she didn't have the radiant joy that most brides have on their wedding day. We were all fooled into thinking that she might have been feeling unwell, perhaps just dealing with a headache or pre-wedding jitters. We felt bad for her, and my sister, in particular, spent a lot of time comforting her and staying close to her throughout the day. We chalked it up to nerves and hoped that once the ceremony was over, everything would go back to normal. After the wedding, life for my dad and Lauren began. For the first 3 months, my siblings and I decided to give them some space. We thought it would be best to let them enjoy their new life together without us constantly dropping by. We wanted our dad to have all the fun and happiness he deserved with his new wife. Looking back, I realize now that this was a mistake, a silly one that we would later regret. It wasn't until 5 months later that I finally visited my dad. As soon as I saw him, I noticed something was different. He seemed quieter than usual, and it was clear that he had lost some weight. His clothes looked a bit looser, and his face had a tired, worn-out look that I wasn't used to seeing. When I asked him if he was okay, he put on a smile and assured me that everything was fine. But I know my dad too well. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and I could tell that something was bothering him. While we were talking, Lauren walked into the living room. I noticed that my dad flinched slightly as she entered, which made me frown. It was a subtle reaction, but it was enough to raise my suspicions even more. Lauren greeted me with her usual cheerful smile and sat down next to my dad, resting her head on his shoulder. We chatted for a while, but the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As I was getting ready to leave, I decided to have a private conversation with Lauren. I asked her to walk with me to my car, hoping to get some answers about what was going on with my dad. As we walked, I turned to her and asked, "Is my dad okay? He looks different, and his behavior is strange. What's going on?" I watched as Lauren's cheerful demeanor quickly faded. She looked down at the ground, avoiding my gaze. "Your dad isn't making me happy, Scott," she finally said, her voice soft and full of frustration. "Ever since we got married, he's been distant. He pushes me away sometimes, and on some nights, he even sends me out of the bedroom." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. "What, are you serious?" He sends you out of the room? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yes, she replied, looking up at me with a mixture of sadness and anger. Can you believe it? I'm a young woman and I'm his wife. But he's treating me like this. She shook her head in disbelief. I was stunned. This wasn't like my dad at all. He had always been caring and considerate, especially towards the people he loved. Hearing Lauren describe his behavior made me worry even more. Something was definitely wrong, and I needed to get to the bottom of it. After our conversation, I left with a heavy heart. I couldn't stop thinking about what Lauren had told me. The image of my dad, distant and pushing her away, didn't fit with the man I knew. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the fact that Lauren seemed genuinely upset. She had always been so good to my dad and to our family, and I had started to believe that maybe she really did care for him. But now, I wasn't so sure. Over the next few days, I tried to piece together what might be happening. I spoke to my siblings, and they too had noticed some changes in our dad during their visits. He was quieter, more withdrawn, and didn't seem to have the same energy he once had. We all agreed that something was off, but none of us could pinpoint exactly what it was. Eventually, I decided to confront my dad directly. I needed to hear his side of the story and find out what was really going on. When I visited him again, I sat him down and asked him to be honest with me. I told him what Lauren had said and expressed my concerns about his health and behavior. At first, he tried to brush it off, insisting that everything was fine. But I pressed him, telling him that I could see through his attempts to hide the truth. Finally, he sighed and admitted that things hadn't been as smooth as he had hoped. He told me that while he cared for Lauren, the age difference was starting to take a toll on him. He was struggling to keep up with her energy and needs, and it was causing tension in their relationship. He confessed that he felt guilty about not being able to give Lauren the kind of life she deserved. He knew she was young and full of life, and he felt like he was holding her back. That was why he had been distant and why he sometimes sent her out of the room at night. He didn't want to face the reality that their relationship might not work out the way he had hoped. Hearing this broke my heart. My dad had always been a strong, confident man, but now he seemed vulnerable and unsure of himself. I could see that he was struggling, and it hurt to know that he was going through this alone. I assured him that he didn't have to face this on his own and that my siblings and I were here to support him. I also realized that Lauren wasn't entirely to blame. She had her own struggles and expectations, and it wasn't fair to judge her without understanding her perspective. I knew I needed to talk to her again, this time with more compassion and understanding. In the end, I learned that relationships, especially those with such a significant age gap, come with their own set of challenges. My dad and Lauren were trying to navigate a difficult situation, and it wasn't easy for either of them. But what mattered most was that they both wanted to make it work, and they were willing to put in the effort to overcome the obstacles they faced. As I left my dad's house that day, I felt a mix of emotions. There was still a lot to work through, but I was hopeful that with time and open communication, my dad and Lauren could find a way to make their marriage a happy one. And as a family, we would be there to support them every step of the way. I deserve his attention, but it's like he doesn't love me. I'm so sad, Jack. Hearing Lauren say that made me feel terrible. She seemed genuinely hurt, and I couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. I promised her that I would talk to my dad and try to understand what was going on. She thanked me and went back inside the house. The next time I visited my dad, I noticed things had gotten even worse. He was quieter than before, barely saying a word to me. His behavior was so strange that it left me feeling frustrated and worried. I couldn't take it anymore, so I left his house in anger, unsure of what to do next. As I was driving away, I received an unexpected phone call from my dad's lawyer. He informed me that my dad had recently contacted him about changing his will. According to the lawyer, my dad wanted to leave everything to Lauren. This news shocked me. I never expected something like this, and it immediately raised red flags in my mind. I decided to share this information with my siblings. We all agreed to visit our dad together, hoping to figure out what was really going on. 6 days later, we arrived at his house, only to find it eerily quiet and empty. I hurried up to his room, and to my horror, I found him lying on the floor, unconscious. I quickly called for my siblings to help, and we rushed him to the hospital. When Lauren arrived at the hospital, her reaction was not what I expected. The first words out of her mouth were, "Is he dead?" No, he can't die now. Has he changed his will yet? He can't die. Her words sent a chill down my spine. How could she be more concerned about the will than about whether my dad was alive or not? My father wasn't dead, but her reaction made me deeply suspicious. I confronted her, asking, "What are you saying? My father is not dead." Lauren suddenly became cold, scratching her head and stammering, "Well, he said he had some changes to do. I was just scared that he didn't get to do that before he died. What happened to my husband?" Her behavior only made me more suspicious. Why would she immediately assume he was dead, and why was she so focused on the will? It didn't make sense unless she had ulterior motives. When my dad finally woke up, he started crying uncontrollably. We tried to comfort him and asked why he was so upset, but he wouldn't tell us. Instead, he asked Lauren to leave the room, which only added to my suspicions. It seemed like something was terribly wrong, and my siblings agreed with me. We began to suspect that Lauren might be abusing our dad and that she was only interested in his money. The fact that she was so concerned about the will was a big clue, and we couldn't ignore it. We also questioned why our dad would suddenly want to change his will in such a drastic way. It wasn't like him to make such decisions without discussing them with us. We started to think that maybe Lauren had pressured him into it. After all, she was the one who had proposed marriage in the first place, which was strange enough on its own. Determined to uncover the truth, we came up with a plan. We knew that our dad would never tell us if something was wrong, so we decided to find out on our own. Before leaving the hospital, we spoke to the family doctor, who had been taking care of my dad for years. We trusted him completely, so we shared our concerns and asked for his help. The doctor gave us a drug that could make a person sleep for an entire day, making them appear as if they were dead. We planned to use this to see how Lauren would react if she thought my dad had passed away. We also arranged for Lauren to stay at the hospital with my dad for 3 more days, giving us time to install hidden cameras throughout their house. This way, we could monitor everything that happened once they returned home. On the day my dad came home, I put the drug into his tea, making sure it was well mixed so he wouldn't notice anything unusual. After he drank it, we left the house, knowing that it would take about 4 hours for the drug to take full effect. I had connected the cameras to my phone, so I could watch everything in real time. We waited anxiously, hoping that our plan would reveal the truth about Lauren and her intentions. I could see and hear everything that was happening in my dad's house, thanks to the cameras we had set up. 7 hours later, I started watching the footage on my phone. My dad had passed out in the living room, just as we expected. What happened next shocked me. Lauren walked into the room and saw my dad lying there, unconscious. Instead of panicking or calling for help, she tried to wake him up by slapping him. I was surprised by this, but my dad didn't move at all. He was completely out. What Lauren did next was even more disturbing. Instead of getting worried or concerned, she started jumping up and down, clearly excited. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment. After her little celebration, she quickly pulled out her phone and made a video call to someone. I watched as she spoke to a man on the other end of the call, saying, "The old fool is dead, baby. We're rich." She was convinced that my dad was dead and that she was about to inherit all of his money. What Lauren didn't know was that the lawyer had played a trick on her. After the lawyer called me, he told me that Lauren had visited him, asking about the will. Sensing something was wrong, he lied to her, saying that my dad had indeed changed his will to leave everything to her. The lawyer had been with our family for a long time, so he knew how to handle the situation. I was so grateful to him for his quick thinking. While Lauren was busy celebrating with the man on the phone, I immediately contacted the police and my siblings. We all rushed over to my dad's house, determined to catch her in the act. When we suddenly burst into the house, Lauren was completely taken aback. She tried to escape, but it was no use. The police were quick to handcuff her and take her straight to the station. At the police station, it was discovered that Lauren and her 24-year-old boyfriend had been plotting to scam my dad. The boyfriend was also arrested, and both of them were taken to court. My dad was heartbroken when he found out the truth, but he didn't waste any time. He immediately divorced Lauren and cut all ties with her. Once Lauren was arrested, my dad finally opened up to us. He admitted that she had been abusing him, both emotionally and physically. He also confessed that he felt ashamed and disappointed in himself for not seeing through her sooner. However, he was relieved that we had saved him from her clutches. My dad also made it clear that he would never date or marry anyone ever again. He was done with relationships after this terrible experience. In court, Lauren was charged with emotional and physical abuse as well as fraud. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while her boyfriend received 20 years for being an accomplice. As Lauren was being led away, she broke down in tears, crying and apologizing to us. Her parents were also in tears. They told us that Lauren had run away from home, and they had thought she was missing. We felt bad for them, but we knew that Lauren had to be punished for what she had done. She was nothing more than a gold digger, trying to take advantage of my dad's kindness and wealth. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying, "I subscribed," and we will do our best to reply to your comment.